he sees this entity that looks like a person coming at him that is darker than the completely black room. He said it's the darkest thing he's ever seen in his life.
So, once again, you found yourself at the campsite of the Orator. Well, please pull up a chair. As you can see, my fire is stoked, which means tonight I have another tale to tell. But before we begin, if you do find yourself enjoying this kind of content, first-hand accounts of the supernatural, paranormal, things that go bump in the night, then allow the spirits to guide your planchette to both the like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell. That way you get notified every time I upload new content, and it allows me to continue to do what I love, which is telling terrifying tales. Second, all of my stories are first-hand accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. So if you or anybody you know has a story that might fit well on our channel, you can either comment below or you can reach out on any of my social media. We will get in touch, collect your story, and hopefully one day feature it here on The Orator. And now, with all of that out of the way, let's get on to today's tale. It is a story that I call The Cleaning Crew. So, it's the summer of 2003. Zack is about 19 years old, and he lives in Detroit, Michigan. He has just recently graduated high school, and he's looking for his very first job. And he actually lands a great job as a part of a crew that goes into houses that have really severe damage, things like fire damage or water damage, and they clean everything up and get all of the damaged stuff out of the house so that people can come in and either repair the house or whatever they're going to do with it. And so he lands this job, and his very first assignment is to go into a house with a crew of people, and this house has really severe water damage. And so they go in, and basically, water has destroyed a bunch of the furniture. There's a bunch of boxes and stuff like that that have been destroyed, shelving, all of that different stuff. And so him and his crew, they go in, they take all of the stuff that is damaged beyond repair, and they take it out. If there's any stuff like carpet that has a lot of dirt and grime and stuff like that, they'll clean that kind of stuff off too and kind of get the property ready again. And so this job is so bad, it ends up taking 3 full days for him and his crew to complete it. But at the end of those 3 days, Zack's boss calls him into his office and he says, "Hey, listen, I have a new crew that I'm trying to put together. It's kind of a specialty crew, and I want you to lead it." And part of Zack is thinking, like, I've been here for 3 days. How are you going to put me in charge of a crew? I don't even really know what I'm doing yet. And the other part of him is thinking, Detroit is kind of a rough city, and I'm sure the turnover rate is really high in this kind of industry. And I was there all 3 days. I showed up early. I stayed late, and maybe he's just impressed by my work ethic, and I'm getting a step in the right direction. I'm excited about it. It's a pay bump, and I'm ready to do it. And so what his boss tells him is this specific crew is not going to be doing like fire and water damage. We're going to be cleaning up crime scenes. And so Zack is kind of worried about that because it's way out of the realm of anything he understands. But his boss says, "Don't worry. I'll kind of show you everything you need to do real quick. And I know a lot of the coroners and stuff like that that'll be at the house, and they'll kind of help you as you go to kind of get your footing and stuff like that." And so he takes Zack out to the van. He says, "This is your van." And he kind of gives him a quick tutorial of all the different tools and how they work and the cleaners and stuff like that. And it's very brief. And Zack thinks, like, I am nowhere near prepared for this. But the guy says, "You also have a crew of 3 people. Here are their numbers. And you have your first assignment in the morning, and just call them and make sure that they're showing up. And there you go." And so Zack feels a little thrown into this. And, he asks his boss a little bit about what the pay raise is and stuff like that. And the boss is like, "Honestly, it's the same pay that you're already making now, but it's a step up, and there could be potential pay raises in the future." So Zack kind of had mixed emotions about this, but he thought, you know what, as long as I continue to do my job well and impress, then I'm going to be moving in the right direction. And frankly, it's his first job, and he's kind of getting maybe pushed around a little bit, and he doesn't know any better because he's a young guy. So they decide to go to their very first assignment, and all they know is that it's an elderly man who passed away of natural causes in a chair in the house. That's literally all they know. So Zack calls his guys. They all meet up at the place, and they go inside. Now, one of the things his boss told him is, don't worry, even though you're going to see some kind of crazy stuff, the bodies will always be removed. You don't ever have to worry about seeing a corpse. But they walk into the house, and what is the very first thing they see? But this old dead man sitting in this chair, decomposed. And it's clear he's been there for a few days. Now, before they even enter the property, they put on full hazmat suits and everything like that. So they're fully hazmated up. They have gas masks and all that kind of stuff. But they walk in, and the smell is so ripe because this guy's been here for a couple days, and it's the heat of the summer that two of his crew members literally turn around, run outside, and throw up promptly. And so it is really nasty. And so, first thing that they do, and they kind of got recommendations and stuff like that from their boss, and the coroner is still there, is to open all of the doors and windows. So right away, they open everything up to kind of try to air things out a little bit. His two guys go outside and puke and collect themselves and stuff like that. They come back in, and the coroner is there. And he says, listen, I'm sorry. The body is definitely supposed to be gone, but my guy that helps me do this is running a little bit behind. So we're going to take care of it in just a minute, but before we do that, let me walk you through. Your boss called, and he told me that you don't know very much about this, so let me kind of walk you through what we're going to do. So he says, obviously the guy is sitting in this chair, and he's been sitting here a while, and he has started to leak and stuff like that. And so the chair itself, you need to disassemble that and get rid of it. He said the carpet underneath either needs to be cleaned, if it can be cleaned, or you need to rip it up and dispose of that. And then, unfortunately, he's been sitting here so long that a lot of this stuff leaked through the floors, and it went down into the basement, and there's a bunch of boxes and his belongings, stuff like that it kind of fell on, and all of that stuff needs to be disposed of. And so basically anything with biomatter on it, this guy's fluids and stuff like that, any of that stuff needs to get completely taken out, and then anything that's permanent to the house, floorboards, rug, and stuff like that. If you can clean it, great. And if not, that also needs to be ripped up and disposed of. And so the coroner, he kind of gives him a tour of all of this different stuff. And then his partner does show up. They take the body outside and they leave. So now Zack is alone with his crew in this house. And they really don't know a ton about what they're doing. And he's supposed to be the supervisor. So he says, you know what? I think the biggest job is all of that stuff in the basement. There's a ton of boxes and belongings and stuff down there. That's going to take not only a lot of time, but a lot of manpower to clean all of that stuff up. I'm going to take care of the chair and the carpeting and stuff like that up here, and all three of you go down and deal with the basement. And so they're all right, cool. So his crew, they go downstairs and they start dealing with all of the stuff in the basement. He's upstairs dealing with the chair and the carpet. So step one is to disassemble this chair. And so he looks at this chair. It's one of these old reclining chairs that's kind of it's got the stick to pick up the legs and recline, and the chair goes back on the backside and reclines like that. And so he right away gets some tools out, and he takes apart the backrest of the chair. And they have these giant bio bags that they can dispose of. They're very specific types of bags that you can completely seal off, and any biohazard material are put away properly in these bags. And so he takes apart the top, he brings it over to the bio bag, and he stuffs it in. And as he's stuffing it in, he looks over, and he's about 10 feet away from the chair, and the base of this chair starts rocking on its own. And it's one of these old, heavy wooden and metal chairs. It's not like the wind blew it or something. And he's nowhere near it, and he has not disturbed it, and all of his crew is downstairs, and yet he's watching as this thing starts rocking on its own. And so he's obviously really creeped out by that, and he's just watching, and then after a second it stops. And he's like, okay, that was super creepy. He finishes putting the thing in the biohazard bag, and then he walks over to it, and he's kind of looking around to make sure there's no animals inside of it or anything that could have moved it. He's looking around. There's nothing there at all. So he's like, all right, that's really weird. And so he starts to disassemble the bottom piece of the chair, the cushion and the stick to pull the leg rests up and all that kind of stuff. And as he's disassembling that stuff and putting it away, he's getting all these chills up and down his back, and he's feeling really nauseous. And he's thinking, nausea makes sense. It stinks to high heaven even through our gas masks in here. But how am I getting chills? It's the middle of the summer, and it's hot. I'm sweating in this thing. The chills don't make any sense. And so he's kind of creeped out But he does finish disassembling the chair, and he puts each of the pieces in their bio bags and seals them up, and he's starting to get kind of a stack of bags from that and some of the other stuff that was sort of around the chair. And meanwhile, his crew downstairs has been slowly pulling boxes upstairs and putting them into bio bags. So he's got like a dozen bags full of garbage and stuff like that have accumulated. And so now he's about to move on to either cleaning the carpet and the floorboards and stuff like that, or he has to dispose of it, and he has no clue which way makes sense. So he calls his boss, and he says, hey, this is kind of what I'm looking at. Is this something I need to dispose of, or what do I do? And his boss says, no. You have a very specific cleaner for this kind of stuff that picks up blood and that kind of stuff. Just go out to your truck, and this is what you're looking for. So he goes out to his truck. He's still on the phone with his boss, and his boss shows him, yeah, it's right here. This is the color bottle you're looking for. It's one of these big multi-gallon jugs. And so he grabs that. He goes inside, and he's getting ready to open the lid and start pouring some of this cleaner on when all of a sudden, all three of his crew run upstairs from the basement and right out the door past him. And so he's like, what the heck? And he sets his cleaner down, and he comes running out, after them, and he's, what is going on, guys? And all three of them, they have their gas masks off, and they're panning outside, and they're, oh my God, they said, we saw and heard somebody down in the basement. There's somebody down there. I don't know if it's a homeless person or maybe somebody on drugs or a crazy person. I don't know, but there's somebody down in that basement. We all saw him and we all heard him, and as soon as we did, we ran upstairs. And so, Zacky's thinking, well, as soon as we walked in, the very first thing we did was open all of these windows, including some of the windows in the basement. Pretty likely that if somebody, and it's kind of a bad neighborhood in Detroit, if somebody wandered by, they very easily could have snuck in the basement. And so, he goes up and he's listening at one of the windows, thinking, if there's somebody down there and all three of them saw and heard it, clearly I'm going to hear it from this window. And so he's listening for a minute, and it's totally silent down there. And so he tells one of his guys, he says, come with me, let's grab the big mag lights, let's go down there and let's kind of search. And, they grab one of these big metal pieces of a fence post that was sitting there just in case they did encounter somebody. And they go back inside, they head downstairs, and the basement is a couple rooms, but it's not huge. And so the two of them proceed to search the entire basement very thoroughly, and there is definitely nobody down there. And the other two, they stay outside, and they're kind of circling the perimeter just to make sure nobody sneaks out of a window, maybe the way that they came in, and nobody sneaks out, and there's nobody downstairs. And so, that's really, really weird and makes no sense, but there's clearly nobody down here. And so Zack and his partner, they start to head upstairs, and they get almost to the threshold of the door upstairs when they hear somebody start coughing violently down in the basement. And they turn around right away, and they run back downstairs, and they look around, and there's nobody down there. But in one of the corners where they thought they heard the coughing come from, there's all of this dust that was kind of disturbed from the floor, as if somebody had just been walking around over there. And, so they look around once more, and there's definitely nobody down there. And they're like, this is really weird. Even though they've been moving around a lot down there, they didn't even really disturb that much dust. So how did this really happen? And so they go back upstairs, and they go outside, and they talk to the crew, and they say, yeah, we didn't see anything down there. We thought we maybe heard something, but there's definitely nobody down there. And so Zack says, it is what it is. This is really weird, but we have a job to do. Get downstairs. You guys finish with the boxes. I'm going to finish cleaning, and let's get the heck out of here. And so he goes in, they go downstairs, and they start working on picking up their boxes. And he goes to grab the cleaner to start cleaning that area off, and his bottle of cleaner's gone. And he's sitting there thinking, they came upstairs. I remember setting it down. It's like a 5-gallon jug of this stuff. Where could it possibly be? And he's looking around, and he can't find it, and he goes downstairs. He's like, hey, did any of you guys take my cleaner? We didn't take it. And they're like, also, since we've been down here moving boxes again, we keep feeling like somebody's touching us and trying to pull us or push us and stuff like that. And all of us have felt it. And Zack's like, okay, again, really weird, but there's nobody down here, and I don't know what else to tell you guys. We have to do this job if we want to get paid. And so he heads back upstairs, and he's thinking, man, there's just too much weirdness going on here, but let's just finish and get the heck out of here. And so he starts grabbing some of these trash bags and starts hauling them out to their vehicle, and he's going to throw them in, and then they'll dispose of it at a proper disposal area. And as he's pulling some of these bags out, he looks, and all the way in back, you have like I said, a dozen bags have accumulated. All the way in back where he had put the backrest of that chair against the wall, the 5-gallon jug was on its side behind that cushion. And he's thinking, that is literally impossible. First of all, I know I said it here. I certainly didn't put it over there. But even if I had somehow misplaced it, I would have had to throw it over all of these bags for it to be where it's at. That doesn't even make sense. And so he's really confused, but again, job to do. He goes, he grabs a cleaner, he pours it on, he makes sure everything's set, he cleans it up, gets everything completely clean there. He takes all the garbage bags out. His people come up from upstairs. They have everything cleaned down there, and they're like, thank God this job is done, because this was really, really weird. And so they go outside, and they finally start to feel comfortable again. They all head home, and that night, Zack has this really weird dream. He's back in that house, and he's alone. His crew is not there with him, but in the house with him is the old man that was in that chair that had passed away. And the old man is trying to push him out of the house, and he's trying to yell at him. He's saying,
Please, this is my stuff. Please leave my stuff alone. This stuff is irreplaceable. It's mine. Don't touch it. Leave it alone.
And he's screaming at them, please don't do this. And Zack is just in the dream completely ignoring him, like he's not there. He hears him, but it's like his body is on autopilot. It's just doing what it does. And so he's picking up the bags, throwing it out, and disassembling the chair. All of the stuff that he did when he was actually in the house, he's doing again in the dream. And then the old man gets so frustrated, he grabs that bottle of cleaner and he throws it across the room, and it lands in the dream exactly where Zack found it in real life. And so he wakes up, and, part of him's thinking, oh my God, were we just, you know what I mean? Like, were we really in a haunted house? Is this really what happened? And he's kind of freaked out, but he's trying to, this is the first time I saw a dead body. This is the first time I've been around such scary stuff. Maybe all of that, plus the guys coming up and saying there's someone downstairs, all of that was really scary. Maybe that has put a mental tax on my mind. And so he tries to kind of forget about it a little bit, but he goes in, and him and his crew get together, and he ends up telling the story. He says, I had this really crazy dream last night. Now, the day before, there was Zack and his partner. They went downstairs to check if somebody was down there, and the other two stayed upstairs, right? Well, those two people that stayed upstairs, they both tell Zack that they had a dream last night, and in their dream, they were downstairs, and they were grabbing boxes and pulling them up just like they were in real life the day before, and the old man was down there, and he kept grabbing them and pushing them, and he was so violently trying to get them out of their house, and he's yelling at them and all that he started violently coughing. And Zack remembers that when they were going upstairs, they heard violent coughing downstairs. And, he's like, I don't even think we told them that we heard that coughing. We just told them we went down there and there was nobody down there. That's crazy. And so they, of course, turn to number 3, and they're like, did you have a bad dream? And he says, I think I did have a dream. I don't remember it. He said, but man, I woke up feeling really, really sad, and I was coughing when I woke up. And him and Zack kind of share a look like, this is crazy, but they all sort of try to justify all of it. None of them wants to admit that they potentially had a paranormal encounter, and so they're just like, you know what? It's over. We don't have to ever go in that house again. Let's just move on. But they're all kind of also secretly thinking, is this what this job is going to be? Like, are we going to go into all these houses and we're just going to have this really weird, unexplainable, crazy stuff happen? And so they're very, very nervous. Now, luckily, after that, for like weeks and weeks and weeks, every day they went to a new location, and they saw all sorts of crazy stuff. Luckily, no more bodies. The coroner always got the bodies out. But they saw all sorts of different scenes. They had a lot of blood and biomaterial and all of that kind of stuff. And so they got really good at cleaning that stuff, and they became a really good crew. But more importantly, they never had any other paranormal experiences again. And so eventually they got good enough over the next month and a half to where they ended up splitting their crew into two teams. So there was the three guys, and they would just sort of randomly partner with one another. And then whoever the third odd man out was, that was the one that Zack joined. And then every once in a while, Zack would kind of have to go back and forth if they needed extra stuff, or maybe there was a job that was particularly hard that they needed extra help for, or something like that. So he sort of was a go-between, but generally speaking, whoever he was with was the person who was the third odd man out. So one day, Zack and his partner for the day, they get a call, and there is a guy who committed suicide in his house, and they need to go clean everything up. And so him and his partner, they head over to the house, and he meets the coroner outside. They already have the body put away and everything like that. And the coroner says, hey, he, did it downstairs. There's a finished basement down there. He did it kind of in the living room area down there. He said, but, I do this all the time. I got kind of an uneasy feeling a little bit while I was down there. So just, kind of be careful in the house. And right away, Zack's like, man, we've had such a good stretch of time without issues. Please don't let this be a problem. So him and his friend, they suit up in their hazmat suits and everything like that. They go inside, and they don't really bother with any of the, windows and stuff like that upstairs, because it was only down in the basement, and it was caught pretty early on, and so it wasn't really that bad of a smell or anything like that. So they head downstairs into the basement and into this kind of second living room in the basement, and right away Zack is like, oh man, this is a bad one. He said, whatever this guy shot himself with, it was either a very high caliber pistol or more likely a shotgun, because the entire wall was covered in, skull chunks and brain matter and blood and all kinds of stuff like that. And so, they already have their equipment. He grabs a vacuum, and that's kind of step one, is to vacuum up all of this biomaterial, the big pieces anyway. And so Zack has a vacuum, and his partner has a vacuum. And his partner, he's kind of down towards the bottom of the wall, and then Zack is up on a ladder, and he's vacuuming on the top of the wall. And as they're vacuuming, they hear this guy's family come into the house, and they're walking around upstairs and all that kind of stuff. So Zack, he turns his vacuum off, he goes upstairs, and he just kind of says, hey, we're down here doing this. The family's like, it's okay, we're just up here, kind of getting belongings and things like that. And, Zack, he's a little bit frustrated because they like to do their job kind of in peace. They don't want other people here, and it's not really his place to stay, though, because it's not like it's his house. And so he goes back downstairs, and him and his partner kind of share a look like, great, but whatever. So he puts, he has his suit back on and everything. He climbs back up on the ladder, and he turns the vacuum on, and even though they're all crying up there, Zack and his partner, they think, well, we got the vacuums on, and thank goodness we at least don't have to hear this. And so they're vacuuming and getting everything done, and then all of a sudden, all of the lights in the basement go out. And right away, Zack thinks, this is weird because our vacuums are still on, and yet somehow the lights are off. This doesn't make any sense at all. Either the power went out or it didn't. And there's not really any windows down there in the basement, and so it's really, really dark. And he hears his partner shut off his vacuum, and so he's just kind of waiting there for a second, waiting for hopefully the lights to come back on, when all of a sudden his partner starts screaming. And so Zack, he's up on the ladder, and he jumps down, and he clicks the vacuum off right away, and he's still hearing his partner screaming. He's like, what is going on? So he reaches for his mag light, and he's kind of fumbling with it. And as he's fumbling with this mag light, he literally, it's black, right? There's no light at all. He sees this entity that looks like a person coming at him that is darker than the completely black room. He said it's the darkest thing he's ever seen in his life. And it is charging at him, advancing at him. And so he is backpedaling, still trying to find his flashlight. And at some point, he runs out of room, and he slams his back against the wall of the basement. And he finally finds his flashlight, and he clicks it on. And there's this guy barreling down on him with this big old mountain beard. And he's got a flannel shirt on, and he has murder in his eyes. And he's running at Zack. But as soon as that light hits him, he just dissipates. And Zack is like freaked out. But his partner is still screaming, and so he points the flashlight at him, and his partner's literally on the floor in the fetal position with his hands over his head, kind of rocking. And so Zack kind of runs up. He's like, are you okay? Are you okay? And his partner turns to him, and then all of a sudden grabs his flashlight and runs upstairs. And Zack right away runs up and follows him. His partner runs outside, rips off his helmet, and just throws up in the yard. And Zack runs outside, and he's like, hey, what happened? Are you okay? And his partner takes a second. He's breathing heavy. He's like, oh my God. He's like, I was sitting there vacuuming, he said, and then the power went out. He said, all of a sudden, I turn off my vacuum, then all of a sudden, this cloud of black smoke kind of came onto me. He's like, I don't even know how I saw it. It was so black in there. He said it was darker than the entire room. And he said it came onto me, and I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't move, and I couldn't even hear anything. He said, you said I was screaming. I didn't even know I was screaming. I didn't hear anything. And this thing was on me, and I thought I was going to suffocate and die. And then all of a sudden, he said it kind of moved off of me and I could breathe again. But then like 3 feet to his right was this entertainment center with the TV and everything. And these trinkets start falling off of the entertainment center. And then a bunch of them start flying towards him and hitting him. And so that's why he got down and started covering up his head, because this thing was literally chucking trinkets at him, and they were smashing against him. And he said, when the cloud moved off of me, that feeling of heaviness and suffocation, it dissipated. He said, but all of a sudden I felt really nauseous. And then when you clicked your flashlight on and shined it on me, I literally felt even more sick and knew I was going to throw up. That's why I ran up here and threw up. And so Zack, he's listening to all this, and in his head, he was kind of hoping that that entity coming towards him was just his imagination, because his partner was screaming and he was freaked out. But now he's thinking maybe there really is something dark in that basement. And so, he doesn't tell his partner any of this. He doesn't want to freak him out even more. And frankly, he's the supervisor. He knows that there's a job to do, and he doesn't want to freak his guy out too much and then have to do it alone. So he says, you know what? Let's just go have an early lunch and kind of get our bearings, and then we'll come back and finish the house in a little while. And his partner's like, yeah, that's a good idea. So they go, they find a place that's serving lunch right now. They sit down, and Zack ends up buying him lunch, and he actually gets him a Gatorade too, because his color is drained and he looks really bad. He's like, you need to drink that and get some electrolytes in you. And his partner, he's just pale and quiet, just sitting there looking down at the ground. And then he looks up at Zack and he says, that smoke, I think I breathed some of it in, and I just don't feel right anymore. I don't know. And so Zack, he's kind of freaked out. He doesn't want to say anything more, and he's just trying to comfort his, kind of friend and partner. And at some point, his color starts to return. He's like, all right, I think, we can go back and at least finish this place up. Let's just hurry up about it. And Zack's like, yeah, I agree. So they head back to the house. And at this point, the family has now gone, and so the house is empty again. They're like, well, at least there's that. We don't have to hear them crying upstairs. And so they start to make their way downstairs very tentatively, and they reach the bottom of the stairs, and all of the lights are back on. And all of these trinkets that had been thrown at Zack's partner and were all over the ground, a whole bunch of them were put back up on the entertainment center. And then the TV was on, and it was blaring baseball, this really deafening volume. And so right away, they turned the volume down, and they shut the TV off. And they're looking around thinking maybe the family came down and did it, but there's all of this, biomaterial on the wall still. They're thinking they're not even allowed down here. There's no way they came down here, cleaned these couple things up, and then left. And so they're really freaked out by the fact that all of this stuff has changed. But they have a job to do, and so Zack gets back up on his ladder. He starts vacuuming everything up. His partner's vacuuming down there. And after only a couple minutes, his partner turns his vacuum off. He runs back upstairs, and he throws up again. And Zack's out there with him talking to him. His partner just says, listen, man, I know this is a crappy thing to do. He's like, but I can't do this house. I got to go. And Zack, he's like, yeah, it's totally fine. We're almost done anyway. I'll finish up, and you can go home. And Zack, he does not want to go back down in this basement. Certainly not alone, but he has been moving up, and he's making a little bit more money now, and he's like, man, I've been doing such a good job, and I really want to finish this job. And so he goes back down, and very, tentatively, he starts vacuuming everything up. And as he's vacuuming stuff and cleaning everything up, he keeps feeling somebody tugging at stuff on his tool belt. And he keeps looking around. He's not seeing anybody. And also as he's cleaning, he keeps, he's got one of these big gas masks on, and so it kind of distorts things a little bit. But he swears he keeps seeing somebody right in his peripheral vision. And every time he sees him, he smells this weird, like, burnt hair kind of smell. And he turns and looks, and the smell's gone, and the thing is gone. And so he's really weirded out by that, and he keeps checking to make sure that, there's nobody tugging on his tool belt or anything like that. And so at some point he finally manages to clean everything up, and then he gets a sponge and he cleans off the wall and everything, and everything's finally done. He takes everything outside and gets it completely finished, and he's had some weird stuff going on this entire time, but at least it's all finished and now he's done. And so he gets everything done, he takes his hazmat suit off, and then he realizes he has to go to the bathroom. And he's like, man, I don't really want to go to the bathroom in this house, but I'm a really long ways away from anywhere else, and I don't know this neighborhood. I can't exactly just walk up to somebody's house. Whatever, I'm just going to do it. And besides, I was just down in the basement, and I dealt with that. I can go pee. So he goes back inside, and he does have to do a couple things, shut the lights off and all that kind of stuff. And so he goes in through the living room, and he starts to head down this hall where he assumes the upstairs bathroom is. And he gets down to the end of the hallway, and all of a sudden he hears crying in the living room. And he's thinking, great, another family member showed up and now I have to deal with that. And so he walks out into the living room to talk to this person, and it's completely empty. There's no car in the driveway. There's clearly nobody in the house. And so he's like, you know what, let's just finish this quick. So he goes back down the hallway to go to the bathroom when all of a sudden he realizes the hallway is lined with pictures. And he's kind of looking at the pictures as he goes, and he's noticing the guy in all these pictures. There's a guy hunting, there's a guy holding a fish, this guy was like an outdoorsman or whatever, but it is the guy. Big beard, flannel shirt in all the pictures. It is the guy that chased after him. And he's thinking, I definitely did not see this guy before. The coroner already had him gone. I didn't go to the bathroom up here. I didn't even really wander around up here. We came in. It was in the basement. We went right down in the basement. There's no pictures or anything like that in the basement. I had no clue what this guy looked like, but that's the guy for sure. And so he's like, all right, I'm going to go. So he goes pee real quick, and then he's like, I'm going to turn off. He turns off all the lights as he's going, and he literally just has to walk out the door and lock the door. And as he's going to do that, he sees that dark kind of smoke fog at the curtain, and it kind of rustles the curtain and then sort of disappears, and he just runs out the door, locks it, and gets out of there. And he's like, again, scary, but thank God I don't ever have to go back in that house again. So again, a little while goes by. They do a bunch more jobs in the coming weeks with no issues, and then one day Zack gets a call about a man who tried to abduct a child in a really nasty part of Detroit. And basically, when the community found out, they rushed him and beat him really, really badly. And he ran all the way back into his house. And then basically people started throwing rocks and stuff like that through the windows. And the police response time in inner city Detroit, in the really bad areas, can be really, really long because they have so much to deal with. And by the time the police arrived, apparently they got inside and the man was deceased. And that's pretty much all Zack knows. And so he heads over to the site, and there's still police officers and stuff like that there. And, he just kind of asks them about, man, what happened? Kind of, what am I sort of expecting here? And the police officer says, it sucks because this was a total misunderstanding. Apparently, this little girl was riding her bike. She fell off it. She had kind of a nasty fall. And this guy was literally just trying to help her up and make sure she was okay. And her friends ran to their parents and were like, this guy's doing this stuff. And the parents freaked out. And instead of asking questions, I guess they just descended on this guy and attacked him until he was dead. It was just this huge misunderstanding. And so Zack's like, that really sucks, obviously, but he goes inside, and the body's obviously already removed, and, there's a lot of damage to the house, but there's not that much for him and his partner to clean up. So he's thinking, at least this is a pretty easy job. And so after a little bit, his partner shows up, and his partner, he doesn't have any of the backstory or anything like that. But while his partner was waiting, was coming, and Zack was waiting for him to arrive, he did all of the pre-stuff. He had his hazmat suit on, he went in, and he was already opening windows and stuff like that to air everything out. And it's like mid-July, so it's really, really hot. And as he's doing this, he keeps getting hit with these waves of fear and sadness, and it's not coming from him. It's like he can feel it radiating toward him. And so he's really kind of already a little weirded out by that. And then his partner shows up, and he's got his suit on, and, they start going to work cleaning. And all of a sudden, his partner stops. He says, man, this is going to sound really weird, but I keep like kind of getting hit with like feelings of sadness and fear, very specifically these two emotions. And Zach's like, well, that's weird because he doesn't know any of this backstory. I didn't tell him about it, and he's feeling the exact same things that I am. That's really odd, right? But they're focused on their job, and it's not a huge job. But as they're cleaning up, they keep seeing out of the corner of their eye this like fog or mist, and what it appears to be doing is sort of peeking around the corner and watching them, and then when they look, it doesn't disappear. It sort of goes back around the corner. And so they keep hearing that, and then they keep hearing footsteps throughout the house, and then they keep hearing someone crying. And he's not just crying, they hear very specifically, not in one area, but all over the house, they hear this guy saying,
"Please help me. Please. No, no."
And they're hearing it all over the house, and it's really freaking them out. And they keep hearing kind of the same almost like progression happening over and over. The front door will sound like it's opening and slamming shut, even though it's not moving at all. And it is really loud, the slam. And then they hear footsteps run through the living room, which is where they're at cleaning up, into the bathroom, and then out of the bathroom and up the stairs. And Zach said, not only do they hear this all very clearly, but when the footsteps were right next to them running by, you could literally feel the floorboards shaking. And so they literally felt the footsteps of this guy running throughout the house. And then he would run upstairs, and there's like a bungalow bedroom up there. And then it would just repeat. And every time this body passed him and he felt the floorboards moving, he heard the creaking, he was hit with another wave of this like sadness. And, him and his partner noticed, all these people in this community, they kept coming back to the house and throwing more rocks at it and just yelling obscenities and stuff like that. And they noticed when these people were away, that it was just like kind of quiet in the house. But every time they would come back, the activity would get a lot more intense. And so at some point, they finally finish everything up. Like I said, it was a pretty quick job, so it doesn't take them that long. And they get everything together, and they take it all outside, and they throw it out, and they're getting their hazmat suits off. And there's only a couple things they need to like shut the windows and stuff like that inside, but everything's clean. And the community, they're all out on their porches and stuff, and they're now yelling at Zack and his partner just for being there. Get out of our neighborhood. You don't belong here. Leave it alone. He's a bad guy. You don't need to be here. And they're starting to get like aggressive with them. And Zack is just like, you know what? Let's just get our stuff and get out of here anyway. That's what we're doing. When all of a sudden the front door that they had left open slammed shut. And it slammed shut so hard, Zack said it literally sounded like a gunshot. And it was so loud and strong that not only did it scare Zack and his partner, but it scared all of these people who are out on their porches so bad that they just turned around and went inside. And so Zack's like, you know what? Let's just run in. We're going to grab the couple things we need to grab, shut everything off, and get out of here. And they run up to the door to go in, and the door had two locks. It had the main lock, like by the handle, and then it also had a deadbolt lock. And Zack goes to open the door, and that deadbolt lock has somehow been thrown. And so he gets out his key, and he goes to put it in, and he realizes the base lock and this lock, the deadbolt one, are two totally separate locks, and he does not have a key to that second lock. And so he can't go in, and all that was really in there was a couple boards they needed to take out and then shut the lights off and everything. And Zack's like, you know what? We've done a good enough job. There's almost nothing left in the house anyway. Let's just go and call it a day. And so they turn around, they sit out in the truck, they're getting ready to leave. And as they're heading back to the site, they're talking to one another. And they're realizing that when they were in that house, they were hit with those waves of sadness and depression, and they didn't even talk or anything like that. They just sat the heads down and did their job. But as soon as they stepped outside, every time, they had like a garbage bag, one of those bio bags to take outside. Every time they stepped outside, the second they stepped outside, it was like all of that was gone. They were happy and jovial again. They were joking with one another again. It was like they were their old selves. And then the minute they stepped back in that house, it was like that feeling of depression and stuff like that was just horrible. And so they ended up leaving, and, that job was done. And Zack, he ended up staying on that job for 2 more years before he went and did anything else. And he decided to quit one day because he said his mental health was just deteriorating rapidly from this job. He said he saw so many, these 3 paranormal things, but he said he continued to see stuff for years after that. He said he has hundreds of these stories. In fact, he had so many, he started to keep a journal for months and months over all the weird phenomena that he had. And so over 2 years, it just took its toll, and he eventually ended up quitting. But he kept in touch with those 3 other guys that were kind of his crew for such a long time. And here's what's crazy. Over the next few years, all 3 of his crew members died. 2 of them committed suicide, and 1 of them overdosed on pills. And so they all died in really weird, tragic situations. And Zack recalls, he said, when these guys came on, they were just like me, young, 19, 20 years old, happy, entire world from most normal guys you ever met in your life. And within 5 years of that job, all 3 of them had died in really weird circumstances. And so Zack, he said, obviously I left at the right time. I don't know what would have happened to me, but he said, I know my mental health was deteriorating rapidly while I was at that job. So thank God he got out of that. He does something completely different now. And he, remembers the things that happen in those houses, but he thanks God every day he does not have to go into one of those houses ever again. And so that's going to do it for today's stories. If you do find yourself enjoying this kind of content, first-hand accounts of the supernatural, paranormal, things that go bump in the night, then allow the spirits to guide your planchette to both the like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell. That way you get notified every single time I upload new content, and it allows me to continue to do what I love, which is telling terrifying tales. And second, of course, all of my stories are first-hand accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. So if you or anybody you know has a story that might fit well on my channel, then you can either reach out in the comments below or on any of my social media, and we will get together, collect your story, and hopefully feature it one day here on The Orator. Lastly, we are rapidly closing in on 500 subscribers. First of all, guys, seriously, I cannot thank you enough for subscribing to my content. It is the joy of my life to do these videos, and I love that you guys are getting a ton out of this and enjoying it. I hope you guys are listening to it. Just the audio while you drive and sitting down with your families late at night and getting scared by this stuff. But guys, we are closing in on 500 subscribers. I can't thank you guys enough for all of that. I want to do something big at 500. So when we cross 500 subscribers, I'm going to figure out exactly what it is, but we're going to be doing some giveaways and some really cool stuff at the landmarks. I want to continue to appreciate you guys because you guys are the ones who are making all this possible. So thank you so much. And so until next time, where you will pull up your chair, my fire will be stoked, and I will have another tale to tell.